I'm looking at some of the comments.
Yeah. Hi,
Here's,
everybody. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for sticking with us through some of the technical glitches. Sorry about that. I'm very excited that you're here to talk with us today about public speaking. So for those of you who don't already know me, my name's Kathy Hanneback. I'm the president of Ideas on Fire, which is an academic editing and consulting agency, and we work particularly with interdisciplinary progressive academics. And across all of our different works, the workshops and events and services and things that we do, we've noticed that a lot of our clients, our friends, our colleagues, people that we run into in various spheres have a lot of anxiety around public speaking. Academics do a lot of public speaking, despite the fact that we don't seem to get much training in it. So we wanted to put together an event today that helped out all of the non-performers, people who are not trained professionally in performance, as few academics are, and put together an event to help them do a thing that we are asked to do on a daily basis as academics, which is speak in front of people. So I'll turn it over to Terry after just explaining a little bit about who he is. Terry Park is a performer, he's a scholar, he's a professor, and in many ways is the kind of perfect person to talk about how to bring the skills and knowledges that he's garnered in the performance world into the classroom, into conference presentations, into academia more broadly. He's a coach in our graduate school Rockstar program, as well as our dissertation Rockstar Bootcamp. So some of you might already be familiar with him and how he brings his performance work into academia. And for those of you that this is the first time you're meeting him, it's going to be a good ride. So I'll turn it over to Terry, and we can just jump right in. Oh, and sorry, last logistic thing. Most of you have figured this out, but if you have comments or questions during the presentation, you can put them in the chat box that's running along the side of your screen. Okay, without further ado.
yes, thank you for that introduction. It's great to talk to you all. I see Takeo, a familiar face, former Mr. Hyphen. That's something that I'll explain at the end of this presentation. So thank you once again for joining this webinar. This is my second webinar. I gave a webinar a couple of months ago on early dissertation planning. So if that's something that you might be interested in, you can, I think, watch the archived video. But today we're talking about public speaking for non-performers. So I do have some theater experience, theater training. I wouldn't say that I'm a professional actor. I think if I were, I would still be acting. But I decided to make a change in my career and go into academia. But I'm pretty grateful for the theater, for the acting experience that I did have and that I managed to bring with me into my teaching, into my scholarship. And so hopefully I have some tips that'll help you. I'm assuming you're all either graduate students or junior faculty, and so you've already had some experiences in front of a classroom, in front of an audience at a conference or a job talk perhaps. So maybe some of these tips will be common sense, but I think it's good to have some reminders, and then maybe some of these tips will be completely new. And actually, this advice is drawing from a blog post that I wrote last year on May 25th on the Ideas on Fire blog. So feel free to go into the Ideas on Fire website, do a search for, performance tactics, and you'll be able to find the blog post. So I'll basically expand a little bit more on some of the tips that I offered in that blog post last year. And of course, if you have any questions or any tips, Takeo, I know you're a performer as well. We all have different tricks in our bag that we can offer. I think this will be a great conversation. So if we could go to the next slide, I'm just going to jump right into the 7 steps. And again, these are covered in the blog post. So I'm just going to quickly go over them, and then we're going to go into each step. The first is to make sure you're comfortable, then to close read your audience. I'm assuming a lot of you are humanities scholars, so you're already well adept at close reading a text. And then third, use a hook, make eye contact. slow down, speak confidently, speak loudly, make dramatic pauses, and then just like in the theater, rehearse. So let's go to the first step, making sure you're comfortable. So, before I jump into this, I sort of made a joke on my own Facebook post when I advertised this webinar that I would teach you to channel your inner Sean Spicer. That was a joke. You should definitely not channel your inner Sean Spicer. I hope you don't have an inner Sean Spicer, but if you do, just keep it in there, because basically you want to perform the complete opposite of a Sean Spicer, right? So as we know from both Sean Spicer as well as the brilliant Melissa McCarthy impersonations on SNL, Sean Spicer is combative. He is visibly nervous. He doesn't like to take questions. He doesn't have much of a connection with the audience, nor does he want one. Basically, everything that Sean Spicer does as a White House press secretary is something that you want to avoid. So instead of channeling your inner Sean Spicer or your inner mediocre white man, I would say channel your inner Beyonce. Any kind of, even if you're not a fan of Beyonce, just the confidence, the exuberance that she displays is, I think, something that we can draw on even in our boring academic lives. And I'll get into Beyonce in a bit. So first, again, make sure you're comfortable. So, I mean, this is, almost common sense, but I think, as academics, whether we're grad students or faculty, we tend to forget our bodies. We forget that we have bodies, that we're just these walking brains. But of course, when we give presentations, we definitely feel the nerves. We feel the stress. I would say even right now, I'm nervous, even though I have acting experience. Every time I get up in front of a class or give a presentation, I feel the nerves, right? And that's something that won't, just go away even after years and years of presenting in front of an audience. But I think it's something to recognize and to actually harness, right? So I would say that's the first step in making sure that you're comfortable, is to be comfortable with your nerves, right? To not banish them away from your body, but just to notice them, which is something that you often hear in yoga. And I would say that yoga is a great way to be comfortable in your body. But yeah, I would say be friends with your nerves, be friends with your stress, but because it can actually be an ally for you, especially if you're not the most extroverted person. The second thing I would say about making sure you're comfortable is to pick clothes that you like, that you feel good in. So if you're allergic to wool, I'm allergic to wool, then don't wear wool, even if you like it, if it looks good, if you have a great wool sweater. If you know it's going to make you itchy, don't wear it, right? Cottons, silk, anything that is hypoallergenic, right? You want to make sure that you're going to be comfortable sitting or standing in front of an audience for a while. Another thing is, I know there are certain, especially for job talks, it might be expected to, like, for example, wear a tie. I personally hate ties because I have like a pretty thick neck that has gotten thicker over the years. And so I just can't wear ties. And I know that if I do, I will only focus on the tie around my neck and not what I'm actually saying. And so the one job talk that I did a couple of years ago, I decided, you know what, I'm not going to wear a tie, even though I should probably wear a tie. There are other ways in which one can dress professionally, right, without having to sacrifice comfort. So just knowing those things about yourself, right? What kinds of materials feel good next to your skin? What kinds of things you can get away with, right? I think are important. And then, going back to Beyonce. So especially before really nerve-wracking talks like a 40-minute job talk or a conference presentation, right? The nerves start to set in. So one tip that a friend of mine actually taught me which I haven't used yet, but I think it's a great tip, is to go to the bathroom before you give your talk, well before you give your talk, so maybe like 20 minutes before, and then look into the mirror and strike your best pose, whether it's a Beyonce pose or a Madonna pose or a Michael Jackson pose, whoever is an idol, a model of confidence for you. If it is Sean Spicer, no, forget, no, not Sean Spicer, but whoever you look up to as someone that you want to channel, strike that pose, hold it for as long as you can, maybe 30 seconds, a minute, and just stare at yourself, embodying this otherworldly personality. Prince, maybe, would be a good example. I don't know, maybe even a cartoon character that you really like. Optimus Prime. Bumblebee is one of my favorite cartoon characters. So if that's someone that gives you immediate energy, then embody that character as if you're actually performing that character. Strike a pose, hold it, stare at yourself until you can feel yourself transform into Optimus Prime or Bumblebee or Beyonce, whoever it is. So those are some tips for making sure that you're comfortable, right? It's all about knowing your body, being comfortable in your body. Irving Goffman, Takeo says. I don't know if that's Takeo's idol, but if you want to strike an Irving Goffman pose, go for it. All right, next slide. So we have make sure you're comfortable and then close read your audience, right? So maybe some folks already do this, but I think it's a helpful reminder, right, that when you enter a room, you're not just entering an empty space, right? Hopefully there's going to be people there, whether it's a few people or a packed room. So what I do is I look at the people, whether they're friends of mine or they're strangers. I see, are they tired? Do they look excited? Do they look completely bored? If it's one of my presentations, most likely they're going to look a little bored. And if that's the case, then I modulate my performance accordingly, right? Another thing about space, actually a couple of things about space. First, if there are only a few people, and this happens all the time at conferences, especially morning panels when there are just a few people, they tend to scatter or they sit in the back because they're super nervous too and they don't want to sit right next to you. But for me, as a former performance artist, I hated it when the audience sat in the back because I rely on that intimate interaction. So I will ask people to move up, which might be a little strange, and you might have to ask them more than once, but they'll understand that it's helpful for the performer, the person giving the talk, to have a cluster of bodies at the front of the audience rather than spread out. The second thing is, so for me, when I was an actor, I would usually arrive to the theater on the day of my performance like a couple of hours early, or even 3 to 4 hours early, because for me, I needed to feel comfortable in a space. And for a lot of us going to a conference, right, usually it's in a hotel with a bunch of conference rooms. We don't know what they look like. We don't know what the tech setup is, which is another reason to go a little bit early. So if there's not another conference talk beforehand, or even if there is a panel in the same room beforehand, I will go to that panel and check out the space and just sit there and feel like I have some kind of connection with the space. I'll even walk around the room if it is possible, just so that I have a sense, right, of how large it is or how small it is. And so I think that's another good trick for relieving nerves, right? Rather than sort of rushing to the room or arriving just a couple of minutes early, you're probably gonna, have to say hi to your fellow panelists. Sometimes you may not even have met them before. So, I think the earlier you get to the room, the better you can situate yourself in the room with the people in the room, and that'll give you more time to close read the bodies and the energy levels in the room, and then modulate your performance accordingly. So that's close to reading your audience. And then third, we have use a hook. So, again, this is something that a lot of people do right at the beginning of a talk, or, even if it's just a regular class, right? Some sort of thing, some verbal hook to get your audience engaged and interested in your performance. And of course, it will help to devise what kind of hook will be effective after you close read your audience, right? So if they look like they are not in a laughing mood, right? They look a little grumpy, then maybe it's not a good idea to come out with a joke, especially if you feel like you're not the most humorous person. And I think I saw Heath Davis ask also how to bring humor in without seeming fake. Yeah, if you're just naturally not a funny person, though, there are different kinds of humor. But if you feel like that's just not your forte, if you feel like that's going to make you more nervous, then don't go with the humor, right? Especially if you see that the audience might seem a little grumpy or antagonistic. There are different kinds of hooks, right? You can talk about contemporary events, what's happening in the world, and how that might connect to your presentation. Or, I like to talk about the space that I'm in, right? So again, if you're at a conference, the panelists, you're all part of a shared experience, right? So you might want to talk about the coffee, the lukewarm coffee that's outside, or, oh my God, did you guys see the donuts that they have? Those donuts are amazing. Something that is immediately tangible, that's right there and reminds the audience and you that you're part of the shared space, the shared experience. So again, it doesn't have to be a humorous hook. There are many different avenues, different angles to get the audience comfortable with you. Yeah. So, and for me, sometimes I use a funny quip, sometimes I don't. And again, that connects to the second step, right, of reading your audience and seeing what kind of hook would be effective for them. Yeah, I think that's it for the hook. So step 4 is making eye contact. So again, another common sense tactic, but I think, might be a little bit tricky for a lot of academics. I think, at least in my experience, being in academia, a lot of academics tend to be on the shy side. They tend to be on the introverted side. And so making eye contact may seem a little bit strange, but it's, of course it's important, right? Whether you're giving a job talk or a lecture or a conference presentation, you don't want to be the person reading a paper and holding a paper in front of your face. I'm sure you've seen that. I've seen that, and it's not good, right? It just shows the audience that you don't care about making a relationship with the audience, that you could be in some isolated room somewhere, right? It doesn't feel like you're, again, part of a shared space and a shared experience. So put that paper down, right? Don't put it away if you really do need a paper. And most, of course, most humanities folks give paper-based presentations. But make sure that if you're holding it, if you're standing up for whatever reason, to hold it up close to your chest. Definitely don't hold it up in front of your face or anywhere near your chin, right? So hold it as low as possible. And of course, having note cards is even, I think, more helpful. And look down, but periodically look up. And, but, don't just look at the same spot in the audience, though I think, that's better than nothing. It's better than just looking down at a piece of paper. But what I do is I scan. So I scan left to right and up and down. And if, of course, this depends on the room, if it's packed, or if there are just a few people up front, right? But let's pretend that it's a room and there are people sort of scattered throughout. So then what you can do is you can divide the room into 4 quadrants. And to make sure that as you look up, and you want to look up as frequently as possible, right? Maybe every other sentence, to look at a different quadrant, right? So you can maybe sort of scan left to right, up and down, or you can scan sort of clockwise, right? Starting in the upper left corner and then going clockwise, or if you want to go counterclockwise, or if you want to just make it random and look at different quadrants, whatever allows you to hit as many spaces within the room as possible. So I call eye contact the glue that ensures your ideas, your brilliant arguments, sticks to as many bodies, to as many eyes as possible. Now, I was just talking to my girlfriend about eye contact, and she said something about how there's a study that that there are people, or sociopaths tend to just stare at someone without, so you don't want to do that. You don't want to be a sociopath and just lock eyes with one person and not blink, right? So that would be the extreme. Don't do that. But looking, right, you want to look around the room as much as possible and make sure that, again, you're making the audience feel like they're part of this experience, of the shared space, of or with your ideas, right? So the eye contact is the glue that holds this entire space together. Yeah, so next, step 5 is, and this is something that I have trouble with, and you may have noticed that with this webinar. So when I get nervous, and again, I'm a little nervous right now, it's okay to admit that, right? We want to be friends with our nerves, with our stress. I tend to speak quickly, and I think that's my normal speech pattern. So when I give a talk, I have to remind myself to slow down. If you speak quickly, right, if you have a paper that you had a hard time trimming, and you just felt like, I have to have every single word in this paper, then you're probably going to speed through, and no one's going to understand anything that you said, right? It's not even worth it. So actually, before slowing down, you want to make sure that your paper is on the shorter side, right? So yeah, so you want to make sure that it's as succinct as possible. And something that I was told actually from an advisor for a typical conference paper is that you only really have enough time to get through one idea, maybe 2 ideas at most, right? Depending on how much time you have. But for the most part, you don't want to throw 4 or 5 different arguments at your audience, right? Remember, they're tired. They've just seen a bunch of badly given presentations. And so they can only take, they only have enough brain space to consume 1 or 2 ideas. So again, before slowing down or thinking about slowing down, make sure that that your paper is short enough, that it only has 1 or 2 main ideas, so that you can slow down. Speak confidently. So if you're not the most confident person, and I would say I'm not on the confident side when it comes to my academic work, I just manufacture it. And this is linked to all of the other steps, right? Feeling comfortable. Making sure you're well hydrated, that you're well fed. That's something that I forgot to mention for the first step, right? So that you don't feel like you're about to pass out, or you're not thinking about how hungry you are. So being comfortable in your skin, being comfortable in the space, right? Again, making sure that you have that relationship with the other bodies in the audience, maintaining eye contact with as many quadrants as possible, will help you manufacture that confidence. And and sort of tricking yourself, right? So I think a lot of us have imposter syndrome at whatever level we're in academia, whether we're a grad student or a younger faculty member. But I think I guess this goes back to acting, right? Pretending that you are brilliant, right? And actually, you are brilliant, right? That's why you're here in academia, because someone believes in you. Believes in your work. And so channel that, right? Again, channel your inner Beyonce or your inner Optimus Prime, and know that you actually have something important to say, not 4 or 5 different things to say, right? Because again, if it's a conference paper, you only have 1 or 2 ideas that you can get across, but you do have something to say. So slowing down and then speaking confidently and then speak loudly. So again, This is connected to a previous step, which is to read the room. If it's a large room and despite all your efforts, you just couldn't get the people in the back to move up front, you're going to have to speak loudly. And in order to do that, you're going to have to use your diaphragm. What's a diaphragm? Your diaphragm is a sheet of muscle that is between your stomach and your lungs. And it's basically the engine of your breath. A lot of folks, and I would include myself, tend to be chest breathers, especially if you're stressed. So I would say most academics are stressed and therefore are chest breathers, right? So they breathe from their lungs or from the top of their body rather than their stomach, their diaphragm. And it makes a qualitative difference in not just the sound, the timbre, but the for lack of a better word, the loudness of your voice. So if I use my chest voice, which is what I'm using right now, because I'm stressed and a little bit nervous, and I didn't strike my best Beyonce pose, and I didn't come to the room beforehand and feel comfortable, then I'm going to give a sort of a breathier presentation that might make it harder to hit the folks who are lingering in the back of the room. But if I learn to slow down and channel my inner Optimus Prime, and then I can channel the diaphragm, which changes the quality of my voice. I can actually modulate it, very much like an instrument, so that if I have to get louder, then I can get louder and ensure that I hit the people hiding in the back, as well as the people in the middle and the front, right? So in that blog post that I wrote last year, I included a link that will give several exercises on how to channel your diaphragm, and it's just good. It's just a good thing in general, right? Because the more that we use our chest voice, the more stressed we get, and it actually tends to create stress on our vocal cords. And something that that I've noticed a lot is that a lot of academics tend to use, I forgot the term for it, but it's almost like, what is it called? Like a frog voice, where they talk like this, or they'll end a sentence like this, which again tends to come from not using your diaphragm. And having that kind of croaky kind of voice is not only unpleasant to hear when you're in the audience, but it is so damaging on the vocal cords. I've had several acting teachers lament the sort of generational shift towards using this croaky voice. And I think there's actually a gendered analysis of that, which I've read somewhere, and maybe that's something we can talk about further. But in any case, to sum up, step 5, slow down. Just in general, in life, slow down. That's something that I just tell my students, is just to slow down in their writing, slow down in their speaking, speak confidently, and then use your diaphragm to speak loudly. So that's step 5. Step 6, make dramatic pauses. So again, this is only possible if you slow down, right? If you're speeding through your paper, you're not going to have any time to make dramatic pauses. But even when I do have a longer paper, I'll still make sure to make dramatic pauses before major ideas. So I don't mean like a Captain Kirk kind of talking like this, right? You want to have a natural, whatever your natural speaking delivery is, go with that, right? But you want to be conscious of your paper and the ideas that you're giving, right? You don't want to just sort of dribble the words out without knowing what you're saying, right? So you want to know what you're saying so that you can make those strategic pauses before the main takeaways of your paper, just a slight pause. And that's another kind of glue, right? Just like how eye contact is the glue that ensures your ideas stick to as many bodies in the room as possible. Making dramatic pauses is another kind of glue that will ensure that the ideas stay with your audience, right? And you don't want to do that, of course, with every single idea or argument or concept, but, you know, go through your paper and actually insert marks, right? You can insert pause in front of your major argument or your major concept. Yeah, so that's making dramatic pauses. And then last but not least, step 7, of course, right? This is a performance that you're giving, whether it's a job talk or a class lecture. You're standing up there, you have people looking at you, hopefully you're looking at them, right? Giving eye contact. It's a performance. And just like any performance, you want to make sure to rehearse, especially if you tend to get nervous, if you have a lot of stress about standing up in front of an audience, then practice your paper, right? Make sure that you can get through the entire paper in 8 minutes or 10 minutes. Make sure that the dramatic pauses that you've inserted actually work. Invite friends who know that you're a nervous person in front of an audience and are supportive people. Ask them to come to your rehearsal and see whether the performance is a good one. If you need more dramatic pauses, if you need to slow down a bit, if you need to work on making eye contact with as many bodies in the audience as possible. If you look like you're a little bit uncomfortable in your body because you decided to wear that favorite wool sweater, even though you know you're allergic to wool, right? All of these elements compose a good performance. And to make sure that you get the best performance possible, to make sure that you do justice to your brilliant work, rehearsing as many times as you can in front of a trusted audience will help ensure that your performance is an award-winning, Beyonce-like, not Sean Spicer-like, but a Beyonce-worthy performance. So those are my 7 steps of using performance techniques. And my giveaway, my takeaway is that we are all unicorns. So this is what Takeo was referring to in the chat bar, that I was Mr. Hyphen. There it is, or that it is, whatever that is. So briefly, Mr. Hyphen was an annual fundraiser / mock beauty pageant for Hyphen Magazine, which is an Asian American arts, culture, and politics magazine based in San Francisco. I served as the executive director a few years ago. I also ran for Mr. Hyphen way back in 2011, and I decided to dress up like a unicorn because my main message is that we are all unicorns. Even whether you're a nervous person, whether you have a lot of stress or you don't use your diaphragm, right? There is something. We have a little bit of a unicorn inside us, and the more that we can let that unicorn run wild throughout a conference room or a classroom or a job talk room, the better. So I hope some of those tips were helpful, and I'd be interested to hear some tips from you. Again, I know there are some performers in this audience that may have other tips. So yeah, thank you very much. Deckard is a replicant. All right,
okay,
another
close out the thing. So are there questions for Terry, or maybe other tips that folks have garnered through the years of how to give amazing presentations?
And I do have one more tip, but I can wait if there are other questions, or a tip that I forgot to mention.
Why don't you go ahead and share that? Okay. People might be thinking.
Just quickly, for anyone who's ever done acting, any kind of acting, most likely you've picked up some sort of what do you call them? Verbal exercises to exercise your mouth, so that you're not slurring your words, but being as precise and articulate with your language as possible. So, I mean, there are some easy ones, right? Like red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather, or toy boat, toy boat. So, if you want to use those right before you give your paper talk, as you're striking your best Beyonce pose, then that'll help relax the muscles in your mouth. A longer one is to sit in solemn silence on a dull, dark dock in a pestilential prison with a lifelong lock, awaiting the sensation of a short, sharp shock from a cheap and chippy chopper on a big black block. Oh, that was close.
That's quite a mouthful.
But there are different, you can look them up, you can Google them online and practice them, before you give a talk.
One of the, I'm forgetting who it was, but one of the comments in here before we got started was folks trying to figure out how to adapt to different audiences, right? And I know you talked about reading the room and seeing who is really there versus who you imagine might be there, this kind of abstract idea of an audience, but actually seeing and registering and recognizing real people. Do you have any suggestions for adapting maybe the same presentation but for different audiences or different spaces?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's helpful to, especially if it's a space where you don't know the people, like if it's not a classroom, right, where you know the students, but if it's a conference paper, if it's a job talk, arriving as early as possible is helpful so that you can chat with some of the people, right, and get to know them. And I think that'll just sort of alleviate your stress in general. And yeah, I think just sort of, just knowing what kind of format or, just what kind of talk it is. If it's a job talk, then most likely you're not going to have a chance to chat with the folks in the audience because you're being moved from meeting to meeting. So you may just have a few minutes and you know that, okay, this is a professional environment. I have to give this long 40 to 50 minute presentation. I may not have time to be casual or to drop a humorous quip at the beginning. And I think that's okay, right? People are expecting you to be as polished of a person as possible, but also showing a little bit of your personality, right? So again, if you're a jokey person, I think, again, reading the room, seeing how, what the energy levels are is good. When I give paper or conference presentations, again, it depends on the conference, right? Some conferences, I think, are a little bit more casual or a little bit more informal. There's more space for more of a chat or a conversation between the speaker and the audience. So knowing the kind of conference, right, the sort of level of professionalization that's associated with the conference can help modulate your performance.
So one of the questions is any tips on basic body movements or physicality, what to actually do with your body once you've claimed the fact that you're in it, you've used it to explore the space, but what do you do with it when you're in front of people?
What do I do with my hands? What do I do? Right. That's from I forgot what movie that was. But Talladega Nights. What to do with one's body? If it's a conference panel, then usually you're sitting, right? Or you're standing in front of a podium, which is nice. If you're a little bit shy about exposing yourself, then you have this block of wood to hide you. If I'm standing, I tend to gesticulate. This is something that my girlfriend has observed, that I tend to speak with my hands. And if that's what you do, then, and actually for me, that helps me get rid of some of my nerves, right? Because I think nerves tend to travel to your extremities, whether it's your feet, right? So a lot of people are toe tappers when they get nervous, or they move their, like shaky leg syndrome, or they use their hands, right? So I think using your hands is probably more acceptable than being a toe tapper. That's actually one thing that annoys me sometimes when I see an excessive use of toe tapping or leg tapping. But it's a sign of stress, right? So I think, again, coming to the room as early as possible, chatting with people if you can, striking your best Beyonce pose, all of these things that will help eliminate the stress from your body, from your extremities, so that when you enter the room, your body is as still as possible. so that people are focusing on what you're saying rather than the shaky leg or the overuse of your hands. But I think a little bit is okay, right? Just like people say, eliminate every single and ah. That's really difficult for certain people. I mean, of course, you can work on it, but I think it's okay to have a few of those nervous tics, whether they're verbal tics or physical tics. I think it's fine, right?
Takeo also gave some really great advice about using gestures to emphasize particular points, which might be a way to channel some of that bodily energy that can show up in toe tapping or nervous movement in some capacity, which that's energy in our body, right? Like that wants to get out through whatever means possible. But that could be a way to channel it into specific gestures that correspond to particular moments in your presentation, right? So you can direct that towards the moments that need emphasis, that need pauses, that need to land. And you can put that nervous energy into those moments, which of course takes rehearsing, right? And recognizing where in your presentation a pause or kind of a space for an idea to land would be particularly useful. And then you can create a gesture that would emphasize that.
Yeah, and to connect that with a comment that I'm seeing from Takeo about being over-rehearsed rather than just rehearse, I think, again, allowing your own personality shine through, whether it's certain hand movements, certain gestures that both get rid of some of your stress and can also emphasize certain points is helpful. And that's something that I do, especially when I have several points that I'm trying to make within an argument. I will do 1, 2, whether I have it on the PowerPoint or not. I think it's a sort of dynamic attention grabber that, especially when there are folks who are a little bit more tired, they're more exhausted, and staring at a PowerPoint, even if it's a good PowerPoint, can be exhausting. The body, right, can sort of immediately focus the room, wake them up a bit. So that's something that I'll do with my hands to emphasize certain points or list a sequence of arguments. And again, gives a more dynamic performance rather than something that is over rehearsed and like super polished, because I think that can be a little boring actually, right? Like a used car salesperson sort of affect, right? You don't want to look like, you don't want to be Sean Spicer. You don't want to piss off your audience, nor do you want to be a used car salesperson and look like you were just, manufactured off the assembly line. You want to be a human being. And yeah, I think being comfortable in your body can help a lot.
Keith's question about getting rid of those kind of verbal tics that we all have in different ways and we all picked up across our lives for different reasons and are regional, are idiosyncratic, are communal. One thing that I found really useful is to become better at silence. Being okay with needing to pause and not say anything. But most verbal tics are a way that we fill space while we think of something that we need to say next. And becoming okay with letting that moment of thought be quiet is one way that you might find useful to get rid of some of those filler words like ums, likes, these kinds of things. And you don't eliminate them entirely. Obviously, we are human. We don't speak the way that we write. Usually, most people don't. And speech should sound kind of different than written work. And it's okay if it sounds less polished. It's okay if the sentence structure isn't the same way that you would write that thing. But being okay with pausing to collect your thoughts, to think of what you're going to say next, to figure out how you're going to finish this sentence, and being okay with that moment being quiet can be one way to at least diminish some of the ums, the likes, those filler words.
I really like that, because when I've seen people give talks and they remain quiet for a little bit, not just a pause, but a moment of silence, especially if I'm a little bit bored or if my mind starts to wander, I'm like, oh, what's going on? So I think that's another good attention grabber, right? It creates a little bit of tension or intrigue. Like, why is this person all of a sudden silent? Am I missing something? Is this something important? What's going on? And it kind of sucks, right? It sucks the room into your talk, and especially for visual-based presentations. I think it's really helpful to pause and allow the room to look at the image without you filling in that close reading, but to just give them a few seconds to take in the image or the sequence of images. Yeah.
Are there other questions in the last couple minutes that we have about presentation challenges?
Oh, hey, Kit. Good to see you. I think Keith Davis had, advice on reducing verbal tics, right, so yeah. Silence, pauses, slowing down. But again, yeah, I don't think it's possible to get rid of every single verbal tic, nor is it, I just said nor is it desirable. I think it's okay to have a few. If you have, if every other word is an or a right, I think I do a lot of rights, or a mixture of rights and ums. If it's every other single word, then yeah, that can be distracting. And that's probably because you're a bit nervous. So I think slowing down, taking the time to get through your presentation, and actually, and this is something that I've done more in the past few years, enjoying my presentation rather than trying to get through it as quickly as possible, because I see it as this really stressful thing, but actually taking pride and joy in my arguments, even if there are just a few people, can help alleviate the stress and can help eliminate as many verbal tics as possible.
Takeo also makes the good point that verbal tics can index informality or create more of a connection with audience. And again, this is completely dependent upon the space and the context in which you're giving a presentation. Certainly very formalized spaces or presentations that are supposed to be very, very formal have a different vibe to them, and you would have a different relationship to those. But the spaces where you can build a more personal connection that can be slightly more informal, and that doesn't mean unprofessional. And I think that's often conflated. Informal doesn't inherently mean unprofessional, nor vice versa, nor does formal necessarily imply professional. But in those spaces where you can have a slightly more human relationship with your audience in whatever capacity, most conferences fall into this category. Most teaching experiences fall into this category, where you're still professional, but you can be informal. You can be a human. You can be friendly in some capacity. And those kind of verbal tics can show up there and almost build rapport in certain contexts, particularly in the classroom with students who are nervous themselves. And we see this when we see student presentations. They tend to hate student presentations, but appreciate the opportunity to get better at some of that stuff. So
yeah, and actually, not at a conference or at a job talk, but in my own classes, even if they're not performance-based classes, if I see that students seem a little sluggish, a little tired, or if it's student presentation day and a student seems particularly stressed out, if I see that they're using their chest voice and they're kind of shrugging their shoulders as they're talking, I'll pause them and say, hey, everyone, not single out a single person, but say, hey, everyone, let's do a quick theater exercise. And one that an easy one is to form a circle and then shake each extremity, because again, that's where the stress kind of builds up. And you just shake each extreme. Now, it depends on whether you're able-bodied or not, right? Then it may not be possible. But if everyone can, then just shake each hand 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 1, 2, 3, then your foot, and then your foot, and then a count down from 8. And I did that last year in my Asian American performance class, and they loved it, especially if they were pretty tired, because it's like an automatic caffeine jolt to your body, and it just it actually like brings oxygen into the body, wakes up the brain. So, little body-based theater exercises. And again, if you just Google them, you'll find a bunch. Can actually help enliven the classroom.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Terry, for sharing your performance wisdom with everybody. And thanks so much for everyone for their participation, their questions and comments, and sharing what challenges you faced in public speaking. And they seem to be pretty common. There seems to be a lot of patterns. And so it was great to see you helping each other, you asking questions, and hearing from Terry about how we can all get better at this.
Mm-hmm.
So just upcoming events that we have for those of you who are interested. Ideas on Fire is going to be at the Cultural Studies Association conference coming up at the end of this month. I know several of you are planning to be there. We are looking forward to hanging out. We're doing a bunch of sessions there. We're doing a session on podcasting and public intellectualism that is going to be super fun. So we're going to talk about kind of how people have used podcasting as a form of public intellectualism and how you can get into that if it's something that you are intrigued by or have an idea for a podcast. You can come learn how to put that together. We're also going to be speaking on at a session about the job search for cultural studies scholars, both within and beyond the academy. And one of the things that we focus a lot on at Ideas on Fire are diverse careers. So using those scholarly training tips, using that experience that you've gained in the academy to figure out the career that is going to be, or careers that are going to be particularly useful for you. And we think broadly and creatively about that. So we're going to be talking about that. And then we have a bunch of author meets critics sessions that we're organizing with some fantastic cultural studies scholars who are writing about everything from higher education policy to for-profit education, to the new economy, to style blogging and fashion blogging, to youth activism and social justice movements. So come on by, say hi. We'd love to meet you in person, those of you who we don't already know in person. And then our next webinar is coming up on May 31st, and that is going to focus on staying motivated over the summer. I know summer is that great time of year for academics when we assume that we can get all of the research done that we weren't able to do while teaching a full load during the school year. But it also should be a time in which you can enjoy yourself, at least to some degree in some way. So we'll talk about how to stay motivated on the projects that you want to get done over the summer, whether they're research projects or teaching projects or housework projects, whatever they might be, how to stay motivated during the summer while also enjoying the season. So thanks so much for being with us today. In about an hour, you'll get a link to the replay video emailed to you. So if you missed part of it or you want to go back to check on stuff, you can do it that way. And the replay is also available to the public after this. So if you have friends who would have benefited from this, or you want to let them know about the fact that they can watch the replay, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. I hope to see some of you at our definitely at CSA, but also at our next webinar. And thanks so much for a fabulous event.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kathy. Had a good time.
Bye.